Hello everyone and welcome to YAM Teens. This month we are going to take a look at one of the YAM's special loans. Now the YAM is lucky enough to get special loans from all over the place for 100 days. Now recently we got this work by Yayoi Kusama titled Pumpkin. Now Yayoi Kusama is a Japanese pop artist, and you'll notice if you look at some of her other work that pumpkins show up a lot. It was one of the things that she kind of thought of herself as a pumpkin. Now, growing up, her family also made their living cultivating plant seeds. So you'll see some of that influence as you look at her work. Now, as we kind of come in closer, take a look at the work and specifically notice two things: the scale of the work and also the two different layers of the work, the black and the bronze over top of each other. Now, how does this scale influence the way that you interact with this work? This work is actually a series of 3, and there's one pumpkin that's slightly smaller and one pumpkin that's slightly larger. So how would that change the way that you interact with it? Also, as you take a look around, notice the pattern that she uses. Now, in almost all of her works, she has a similar pattern with the dots. But how would this work change if there was a different pattern? Now, let's head into the studio and let's take a look at pattern today. So today in the studio, we're gonna make our own scratchboard. Now, one of the things I like about making your own scratchboard is that you can use any type of paper that you want, or any color that you want, or from any source. So I've got some paper here. I'm gonna use this Sprite sheet, but you could also use like craft papers that you find, old magazines, parts of books, or this is from an old calendar, anything that you can find or that you find interesting. So I'm gonna use this piece mostly so that people at home can see it as I start to scratch through. Now, I don't want this to move while I'm working on it, so I'm going to start by just taping it down on all 4 sides. If I go all the way to the edge with the India ink, it will also give a nice border. Now, one of the things about using India ink is that it is permanent, so if you want to make sure you use it in a spot where you can either cover the table or cover your space, and also make sure that you wear clothes that you don't necessarily care about, just in case something happens. So I'm going to finish taping this down. Now, what I'm going to do here is I am going to need a few other things. I'm going to use a oil pastel that is this is a clear blender, but you could also use one that was white, or if you wanted to use a color, you absolutely could. So I'm also going to need a little dish, some India ink, as well as just a foam brush or any sort of wide brush that you have around your house, where you can cover the whole thing. So I'm going to start by just taking my blender, and I am going to cover the whole area, my whole paper, with the oil pastel. Now it's a little hard to see because it is a clear blender, but you want to make sure that you get the whole space. Take your time doing this, just so you make sure you've got everything covered. And you can kind of feel where it's at. Brush away any excess bits or pieces that may have fallen off before you start with the India ink. I think we're good here. All right. So what you're gonna do next is you're gonna take the India ink and you're going to dump just a little bit into your tray here. And then I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna put a thin layer across the whole thing. Now, if you have a piece of paper where you don't want some part of it covered, you don't have to cover the whole thing. You can leave the edges open, you can leave certain parts of it open, however you would like to do it. I kind of like this edge I'm getting here. Just really, really lightly. Light and thin. Once you get the whole thing covered, and let it dry. Now once it's completely dry, you can also use a blow dryer to kind of help it along a little bit if you want to. The next thing I'm gonna need is something to scratch through with. Now I've just grabbed this, it's just a bamboo skewer like that you would use like on the grill. But I've cut off the end so that it's not quite so long, and I'm gonna use that as my tool. Now, I'm gonna take a simple object to begin. It could be an animal, it could be something that you have in your house, or maybe it's a type of food, like a pumpkin. And I'm gonna start by just outlining that. Now, I've decided, I think I'm gonna do a jellyfish. So I'm gonna start, and it doesn't take much to scratch through the surface of your scratch board. It's really nice and smooth. So now before I go any further, I definitely want to add in a little bit of pattern to some of my things. Now, Yayoi oftentimes use circles, and I do think that circles will work really well in this area here. And just like we kind of saw on Yayoi's pumpkin, her circles are sometimes get bigger and sometimes they're smaller, and that type of pattern and repeating shape makes her pieces really interesting. I'm gonna start with 5 big circles at the bottom, and then as I go further back, I'm gonna get a little bit smaller. Now I think there's a lot of other really interesting patterns and designs that we can use on some of the rest of this. Take the time to really fill in and think about the space. Think about the pattern. You can think about the size of your pattern as well. Does it get bigger? Does it get smaller? Is it always the same? Then I can go back in and add any more details.
We would love to see what you all create using Scratchboard and pattern inspired by Yayoi Kusama. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you next time.